Hey everyone, welcome back to another PC port review. Today we're looking at Lego Batman, and this one had some controversy behind it simply because the spec sheets when they were released were pretty much insane, all requiring upscaling, all requiring frame generation, and when you play the game, things are pretty good early on, but they do tend to change. We do get the classic Unreal 5 engine stutter. However, though, I would say that this game is far more optimized than other games that use Unreal Engine 5. I wanted to pick some sections that were pretty easy to spot and just early on in the game to give you an understanding of what's happening and how the game in fact performs. We are playing on high settings, we are using FSR, and it is on the quality preset. Now, when you first play the game on the default settings, it's going to show it as TSR, but it's going to reduce the resolution to 87% and then add some form of upscaling, just to make you aware of what actually happens when you're playing the game in the first place. Frame gen is always off for the port reviews as well. What you're seeing right now is just one of the intro sections in the game. Basically, you're early on, about maybe 35 to 40 minutes in, and you can clearly see some things are going quite well. The average frame rate on Intel Present Mon is around 119 to 120 FPS, which looks pretty good. The GPU busy line is in fact right together, so we don't have a CPU bottleneck either, and even all the CPU cores and threads are running pretty evenly. Everything from 39% to around 55-51%. Looks like threads 15 and 16 are the ones dealing the most of the brunt with what's been going on, but all the other cores and threads are working quite well. RAM allocated is at 17 gigs, RAM dedicated is at 5, so if your PC only has 16 gigs of RAM, you should be looking, in fact, pretty good. Really shouldn't have any sort of problem. In terms of the GPU, though, we are at about 93%. Not completely flush, but we are seeing some slight spikes here and there in the frame time graph as well, which cause a little bit of a dip every now and then. Nothing too insane, but they are there. They seem to be more like micro stutters rather than insane traversal stutters like we normally get with Unreal Engine 5 on top of that. VRAM allocated is 8 gigs. VRAM dedicated is 2.5. Again, this is on high settings. So if you're on an 8GB card or even 10 or 12, you should be okay lowering the texture resolution if that comes to a specific point. Now here's what happens. As you can see, the frame time graph looks pretty good on MSI Afterburner, but Intel Present Mon shows a different story. We see some dips and valleys, especially some certain spaces, and whenever new things come up in the game as well. Playing it, though, still feels pretty good. There's no major stutters when turning the camera, there's no major issues when actually playing the game itself, but things are still having the slight micro stutter that you can definitely feel when using a mouse and keyboard. Definitely, in my opinion, use a controller instead for this game. It makes the camera movement feel a little bit less jittery, but still, it's something you're going to be experiencing while playing this game in the first place. Although, right now, things look pretty good. We're getting about 93 FPS, even in the section with some enemies. Once we get into the open world into Gotham, unfortunately, though, that's where things tend to take a bit of a turn, and really, why I wanted to show this video in the first place. Now, once you get into Gotham, things still seem to hold up pretty well, especially in the smaller areas. Not really in the city itself, but when you're doing a lot of the side missions or into some of the other areas as well, where Gotham puts you in smaller sections. Frame rate still holds up quite well. For some reason, this game did not like Intel Present Mon either, and it would then glitch out and show me a lot of stutters and things happening in the background, even though MSI Afterburner wasn't showing that at all. So I decided to not use it in the meantime, seeing as how the data wouldn't be correct and it would mislead you, the viewer. So here's what we're seeing right now. 104 FPS still on high settings, not epic, and using the actual quality mode with FSR. Still about the exact same kind of usage as well, even though VRAM went up 2 gigs, or about 10 gigs of VRAM being dedicated and 8.1 being allocated. This is where you're going to be having a hard time with GPUs that are only 8GB of VRAM. That's going to be a bigger issue when you get into the Gotham area and where things get to be a little bit more hectic overall. CPU cores and threads still looking pretty good. Threads 15 and 16 are still having a problem. And even the RAM itself is still pretty much in the same ballpark, except now we're allocating 17 gigs of RAM and dedicating 4.1, or maybe around 4.2. That's where things get to be a little bit tough. You start to see a bit of an issue where a lot of the game itself is now trying to add or ask for more resources, even though your PC may not have them in the first place. And that could cause some concerns in terms of stutter, traversal, and even then bad performance overall. I'm running a 7900 XT, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, and also a 7700X. So my performance may not be what you're looking to see on the average PC is going to be. Really, I want to give different perspectives on that. That's why I kind of want to show you guys this, the Steam Deck, and the ROG Ally X. Now, the game itself does run quite well. The thing is, though, even right now, the frame rate looks good. When you get into the open city and the open world of the game, things tend to take a turn. And that's where I think a lot of people are going to have a bit of a problem. Now, once we get into Gotham City, where the open world is and you're driving around with more enemies on screen, more people, more things happening, more stuff floating around, Unreal Engine 5 rears its ugly head. We're not getting 100 FPS anymore, not 120, not 140, even still on high settings with FSR at quality mode. What we're getting right now is mid to low 70s and sometimes upper 60s in frame rate. With this kind of hardware and this kind of setting, I really shouldn't be getting this kind of frame rate pretty much at all, honestly. Now, some sections you'll see a higher frame rate than others. That's mostly because it turns out that the more enemies are on screen, the more people in the area, the more things that happen, the harder your frame rate is going to in fact tank. So some sections like we're getting right now are 120 FPS. In other areas as well will fall into like the low 60s, sometimes even to the 50s when things start to happen in real time. And I think that's really one of the major factors of this game. We're looking at the fact that it's not consistent in frame rate across the board. And the cool part though is, which I'm kind of impressed about, is that even though the frame rate does drop, there's no massive stutter in that dropping of the frame rate at all. It's kind of weird when you see what happens. In fact, I don't even have VRR on either, and I'm playing without VSync and without any sort of FreeSync on either. I always pretty much turn those off whenever I do port reviews. So clearly, we're seeing some pretty good work being done on UE5 with the LEGO team as well. It's not horribly optimized, but it's not great either. And again, some sections you get a high frame rate depending upon what's on scene, but in other areas you'll get incredibly low frame rates. Like right now we're sitting at 63 FPS just looking over the actual city. With FSR active and everything else, we should be quite a bit higher. And that's really one of the bigger concerns. It seems to me that this port is in fact more CPU dependent than I would actually like it to be. And even though it runs semi-okay, I think the big problem is if you have older hardware, like an 8GB GPU, or a CPU that may not be up to snuff, you're going to be having a much more difficult time in this game trying to run it. And I think the funnier part is when you see what actually happens when you go from high to the epic settings, and especially when you turn off any sort of upscaling. So just to give you a quick rundown, we are on epic settings and I have FSR set to quality right now, just to give you guys an idea of what I'm seeing on the settings page here as well. Now, even on epic settings, we're getting around 65, 66 FPS, and it's somewhat decent. I'm actually quite impressed on this, even with everything happening on screen. But you can see the actual frame time graph shows those really intense micro stutters, and even after you destroy a couple of things, you get a stutter on that line as well, which really isn't a fun piece to have overall, when especially you're trying to run it at a higher setting in that space. You can also see those micro stutters happen as I turn the camera in this section right here. In fact, I wanted to see what it would look like or have a frame rate of when I put it to performance. And sure, we're not really CPU limited. We went from 60 FPS to around 75, so we gained around 10 to 15 FPS going all the way to performance on the epic setting. We still have all those really intense micro stutters still occurring while we're playing the game. And they are able to be felt, I guess, far more when you're using a keyboard and mouse. And it really is a bit more jarring. You may even be able to catch this during the video, but you'll see a slight stop real fast, then move right back and go from there. I think what's happening at that point in time isn't traversal, but I think the issue may in fact be Lumen and the ray tracing that's been going on inside of what Unreal Engine 5 is doing. It's either trying to calculate it too fast, or it's just not enough power to push through what it actually wants to do, even on the performance mode. But let's see what it looks like without any upscaling at full epic settings and see if that spec sheet was right. Now, epic settings with no upscaling everything set to the max, we're getting 45 FPS. And yeah, you can definitely see the slowdown in the frame time while playing the game. 19 gigs of RAM allocated, 6 gigs dedicated, 12 gigs of VRAM allocated, 8 gigs dedicated, and of course the GPU is practically almost flushed. The nice thing is though, we're not getting a CPU bottleneck, but that frame rate is definitely not applicable at all. Personally, if you're going to be playing this game, you're guaranteed going to have to be using some sort of upscaling, and your CPU is going to be hammered pretty hard, especially if you are on an 8 GB GPU as well. Personally, I don't think this is honestly a good sign for this game, and things get even worse though when you see what happens on the Steam Deck. On the Steam Deck, it's bad, but not terrible, if that makes sense. We're getting around 40 FPS. We're sitting around the upper 30s to lower 40s at some points, and depending upon what actually happens, we're dipping into like the lower 30s as well. I haven't really seen any major dips into the 20s, although it does happen randomly, and then it shoots right back up to the mid 30s on top of that. Now, as you can see, all the actual Steam Deck CPU cores and threads are almost maxed. We're sitting at 80% across the board with practically all of them. The frame time graph on the Steam Deck is not great. Now, this is at 720p with everything on low settings and performance for FSR. And yeah, if you are on a position where the only way you can play this game is on the Steam Deck, it's not going to be a horrible time, but it's not going to be a great time either. You're going to have pretty much a lot of inconsistencies when you're playing this game in the open world of Gotham, but when you're in a closed area, you're going to be hitting 60 FPS, which is actually pretty impressive. It could be a lot of concerns with Proton in the first place with the compatibility layer for Linux, but I don't really think that's the issue. I think just UE5 is incredibly heavy on a lot of hardware, and I think that's where a lot of these issues are occurring. The cool part though is I was actually expecting a lot worse. We've seen worse with UE5 as well, and clearly things could get better if they decide to optimize it even further. I think forcing Lumen is going to be an actual problem, or even in fact forcing ray tracing. If they were able to give you an option to remove that, that'd be nice. But unfortunately, it's part of the entire thing. And that really does have some issues overall. But as you can see, as we get away from the city itself, we're at 60 FPS, 57 FPS, 58. Smalled it to 43, but back to 65. It can be playable. It can be fixed. It can be in a space where it could be a viable way to play this game on the Steam Deck if the player was given more options and more optimization was done on this space. UE5 could be a good engine, but unfortunately, we tend to have to deal with all of this. And again, it's not terrible, but it's not great either. It's somewhere like in the middle. And I think the spec sheets that they put out were honestly incorrect, almost as if they were actually AI. Being able to play the game like this on the Steam Deck alone should have been what was presented in the first place. And if they would have fixed the frame time or just the visuals itself or just the frame rate, they could have presented that and been like, check it out, y'all. It's Steam Deck verified. You can even play it on the actual deck and it runs at this resolution, at this frame rate with these kinds of settings. It would have had a totally different tonality in what actually happened in the actual game itself. Would have been great to see. But I wanted to go one step further. How would it run on the ROG Ally X? Now, on the ROG Ally X, I'm playing it at native 1080p with the exact same settings as the Steam Deck. Everything set to low and playing it with FSR on performance. As you can see, we're getting 60 FPS on the ROG Ally X. Granted, that is a $1,000 handheld device, but a lot of the hardware in the ROG Ally X is very similar to a lot of people's current PCs and could be a viable step or alternative into what people are looking for, or a better way of showing what a mid-range PC would more than likely act like while playing this game. If you set everything to low and you have it on performance at 1080p, you're going to be getting 60 FPS, falling to around the 40s at some sections depending upon how heavy things are, which we just saw right now, but it'll climb right back to that higher frame rate overall. If you wanted to go even further, setting it to 900p, which is where I think the ROG Ally X should be, will get you a better frame rate as well, keeping you closer at that 60 FPS line overall. Granted, again, not the best port, but not a horrible one. And I'm actually kind of impressed I'm not dealing with a lot of traversal stutter that I normally would get inside of an open world game with UE5. It seems like they might have solved that issue, but it looks like they've also offloaded a lot of that stutter onto the CPU, because you can see all the cores and threads here. I mean, CPU 1, 2, and 3 are sitting at like 70 to 60% usage. That's insane. And sometimes even jumping up into the 80s at some points, depending upon what's happening on screen, while everything else falls into like the 30s and 40s. And the frame time graph doesn't look that great either, with a lot of micro stutters that really can impact the performance and the viewership of what you're playing as well. It's not a bad port. It's not a great port. It's like right in the middle. But I really feel like what WB was doing was showing you the worst case scenario of what this game performs like, or they just used pretty much AI to make the spec sheet and tell you what the actual performance is going to be of the game. If you have a pretty good piece of hardware, you're pretty set on a PC, you're somewhat near what the actual ROG Ally X is around, you're going to have a pretty decent time with the game if you're playing at 1080p and you're upscaling. If you have an 8GB card or a lower end CPU, you may have a tougher time overall, which could be a really big issue for a lot of players. Unreal Engine 5 needs a lot of optimization, a lot of work in terms of what Lumen can do, and also just the frame rate overall and the performance of that engine as well. If it's going to be this ubiquitous across the board, then it's got to be better for the user. And clearly developers have to put in more work for their ports before asking for $90 for early access and $70 for the game up front. That's kind of like my thing on this. But you know what? I want to hear what your performance is like on Lego Batman. Are you having the same issues that I'm having? Are you getting better performance or even worse? Have you found any ways of actually increasing the performance at all? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a great one, and I'll see you guys next time.